sign-ups. Like, did you all?
Yes. Oh, don't worry about it. Not like the three of us are talking, nobody's listening.
Yeah, no, yeah. I was just like,
All right, let's go live. So, I've got two unbelieving professionals over here. They don't think that anybody's listening to you guys. But actually, I've got Kavita and Gunjan, Kavita Rajwade and Gunjan Arya. Welcome to this particular show of Tell Me About It. We are trying to do this for the past few weeks now. And this is the first time we've been blessed with two lovely ladies. And I'm feeling extremely, extremely conscious of the fact that I've been wearing a particularly whole-driven T-shirt. But welcome. What I wanted to do was maybe just give a little bit of context for today's webinar, and then maybe just talk about you guys a little, and then just throw open the questions right from my side as well as the audience's side. We'll also be getting a lot of live questions. So here we go. Let's start with Kavita. Kavita and I have been associated with her cracking the whip and making me do her podcast one show at a time. And I just go, yes, ma'am, to her almost every single day. I'm missing a deadline. So I know her really well from that side. I also know that she's an extremely and energetic producer of IVM podcast shows. And trust me, Kavita, the amount of iconic, fervor that people have about IVM and obviously about OML as well, Gunjan, is just amazing. I mean, I've never seen such iconic brands being featured like this with so many young people. In fact, what I wanted to say was, here we are doing a webinar, right? And we are creating a new kind of content about new kinds of content, and we are talking about discontent with content. So it's a crazy little world. But Kavita has always been associated with new businesses, and I think that she went from new business to new business, and I think she's found her calling, her latest calling in the podcast industry. So welcome. I've got Gunjan as well, and she's she realized that advertising was not her cup of tea, or at least advertising is not the way to build anything in society, or maybe brands in general, and so therefore she looked at brand consulting, and so that's where she cut her teeth. And from what I understand, you moved from brand consulting and started really developing this unique kind of company. We all know of it as OML. So when I was heading placements at MICA, right, and when we were looking at, so we used to call it OML. So I was like, what is OML? Because I just shifted from London to Pune, and I was like, Only Much Louder. Like, damn, a company is called Only Much Louder. Wonderful, yeah. So India is really progressing. So welcome, Gunjan, and we are very, very pleased to have you, the CEO of OML and the co-founder of IVM Podcast. So this is a wonderful occasion for me to kind of set the tone. What we are trying to figure out is, see, we've always talked about content, right? And the content, changing content, this, that, and the other. We keep talking about it. But what we really don't know is how content is going to get shaped for the future. And especially with this COVID-19 thing, which must have come across as an opportunity and as a threat, right? And we'll be getting into a little bit of that for both of your businesses, right? And we're going to figure out, what the path ahead is and what your observations are, and just learn something from you, which doesn't really, that information doesn't exist in the world, is the way in which I look at it, because there's so much of information nowadays that you can move from one place to the other and kind of form a view. But I wanted to reach out to the experts and figure out how you guys are really thinking about this particular subject. So having said that, having dispensed with the formalities and having introduced the subject to the audience, here is what my first question is, and I'd like let me ask the question first, and that is about, what do you see for yourself in the near future? Like, when I say near future, it means 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, right? For your business and for yourselves, right? How has business changed? So maybe you can give us a little bit of a backdrop to what your answer is, and then answer it from that perspective. So I don't know, whoever wants to go first can go with it.
Oh, Gunjan.
I stop talking.
So, just a quick intro to what OML does, and then I can sort of
Yeah.
talk about how each one of those lines of businesses are looking at the immediate and near future.
Mhm.
Um, we started out as artist management, and that continues to be the DNA. We used to manage independent musicians earlier. Now, of course, the roster has expanded to include comedians and writers and directors, um, and they're all very busy. They're producing more content. They're all at home. They're obviously figuring out how to make sure that we use this time well in the immediate scenario, as well as work on development of shows going forward.
Right.
So that's one. The other one is the content business, where obviously there isn't much live shoots going on, but we are trying to figure out what it means to come back, and we're actually developing an SOP for, once shoots resume, what does it mean? How do you sanitize them? How do you make sure that they happen under hygienic conditions? And
Very funny word to use, sanitizing.
sorry, I didn't catch that.
That's a really funny word to use, sanitizing them. Okay.
Absolutely, but unfortunately, the need of the hour, right?
Yeah.
So that's happening on the content side. Then there is the live events team,
Yeah.
which obviously is the hardest hit, given that I don't see massive festivals like the Bacardi N87 Weekender happening anytime soon, because it's not just about us being comfortable putting it together, but also expecting folks to feel comfortable to come out, where people up to groups of like 20,000 come out together. So Voto obviously will take a long, long time. And that
I
the
Gunjan, I think that Symbiosis and Slim, you're making a lot of art break right now. When you're saying
but
that.
well, actually, I was just going to say that we managed to pivot very quickly to digital events, and we actually did 2 editions of Weekender Online. Kavita and I were chatting about it a few, and outside of that, we've done the Circuit Comedy Festival online as well, and we've done a bunch of other shows. So that team's currently working on digital events as opposed to live events.
Yeah.
And then there is a global brand solutions business, which is currently focusing on creator led content, which is easy to produce during the lockdown. And we're working with brands across 20 plus countries, making sure that we have on point, extremely relatable, authentic content going out from creator feeds globally for all languages in those markets. So that's really what the business looks like right now. Of course, time will only tell. The governments have far more urgent and pressing matters to attend to, instead of looking at the entertainment industry and seeing how that revives. But we're guessing that films will have to come back sooner or later, because that's obviously more mass entertainment. And once things like that start, for us, it'll be really easy to get started again.
Okay. So, in a nutshell, background that you've given us, how do you see OML moving in the next 6 months? Are you moving to digital events, or are you going to stay and wait course and then go back when business becomes normal again? Is that what's the plan?
So honestly, there's no way to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
But more than opportunism in crisis, I feel like this is an opportunity for us to really try new things. A lot of things that were on the back burner and never really got experimented with are happening now. So in fact, there's a network TV show. I think CBS did a courtroom drama where they actually shot an entire season finale using Zoom calls.
Oh, really?
And they actually put the episode out. So I'm sure more and more of these things will happen. A lot of us are going to be trying these. In fact, we're shooting a bunch of content pieces that are shot in lockdown at home. We just put out a music video with Ritviz, which is completely user generated. So we got everybody, all his fans, to send in music videos, and we edited and put it out together. So a lot of that will happen, which is more immediate short-term solves. Also, with digital events, we know that it doesn't necessarily replace the intimacy of attending, or we will have to keep bettering that. And then, of course, as and when things open up, I believe we'll see a combination of both digital and physical events. Even physical events will have to get a lot smarter. Honestly, we are the ones to blame. We haven't really modernized with time, because a lot of things were sort of going on as they were. And the philosophy was always, hey, if it's not broken, let's not fix it. But it's
No.
this necessary pause which will almost force us to figure out, hey, what are the things we need to do?
Right. Okay. All right. Well, on to Kavita then. What do you think, Kavita?
So the good thing, unlike Gunjan or maybe OML, where the business relies on being outdoors or requires you to podcasting that way. And one thing that I've always like enjoyed about audio, right, that it's a very simple, frill-free, dynamic medium. One thing that at IVM, and just to give everybody here who's listening to us an idea, we're
Yeah.
currently like India's like 10 most, probably varied genre content platform. We've been around 5 years now. We've been pretty much, trying to write the rule book as we go along because one very interesting stat in 2016, 82% of India heard their first podcast, an Indian podcast. And way back in 2016, it was us, and so I think IBM could take a lot of credit for introducing pretty much what an OML probably would have done way back in 2010 when they first put out their edition Weekender. Where so these are subculture businesses, right? And you are going to go from a very minority audience to kind of build it into someone's habits. So, I mean, to just, like to compliment Gunjan on everything that they do at OML, I haven't missed a single edition of Weekender. It's something that is really close to my heart, and I'm really worried that this year I will not be able to go to this festival. But at the same
Hey, we
time,
don't know that yet. Let's not.
I will wait for like some great news to come to me from that perspective. But I think what at IBM, the fact that we're an audio network, the fact that we've always thought that since it's a single sense immersive experience, we
Yeah.
must ensure that we deliver great quality. Not the content perspective, but just generally what the experience is, right? Internationally, fiction is really, really huge, and but at the same time, fiction needs a lot of money to be made and created because it's got voice actors, it's got
Right.
production, it's got a lot of that kind of stuff, right? We first started putting out conversational shows because way back in 2015, 2016, India doesn't have a talk radio culture.
Hmm.
Our radio stations, TRAI regulations don't
No.
allow you to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
news, current affairs, politics, any of that, right? And that's where we saw this huge content gap and thought we should be there. One very quick thing that has happened for us, post Corona, at the same time, at the end of it all, I don't think we really figured that it was going to take us this long to kind of get out of lockdown. So initially,
Yeah.
it was a very like, okay, this seems like we need to kind of pretty much work from home. Okay, how quickly do you need to pivot? Do you need to kind of just modify some ways of working?
Yeah.
And and we needed to prioritize. And you go back to the drawing board and you think, okay, why did you start doing this in the first place? And we very quickly kind of found that almost all our hosts were willing to kind of host their shows from their homes. The good thing, like I said, with audio, frill free, right? Like you really actually need a great quality mic,
Yeah.
quality conversation, because that's where it's at the center. So I think in the last 7 weeks of lockdown, I mean, I think the bestest pats that we've got on our backs is that thank you for continuing to put your shows out, because if there's any normalcy in our lives right now is to at least like listen to our favorite hosts.
Yeah.
And really, actually, we thought that I think one day before actually working from home, I really thought that we could probably hit maybe 50-60% what our content cycle was. But it was amazing to kind of see that we kind of hit that 90 to 93%, like very, very, very quickly. So I mean, that's something that I'm happy about, because like I said, that it kind of gave us an idea of how you could use technology. Like Gunjan said, that there were some things that were just on the back burner. We didn't experiment, we didn't figure how we should kind of work some ways. But I think I'm really glad that we've managed to hit a certain kind of cycle. And and now, like I said, the bigger challenge is to kind of produce shows remotely. Earlier I have, like, this, Sid, like I have, had enough and more playtime in the studio where I would put you in the studio and get you to speak. And, I don't have that opportunity anymore. And so now I'm pretty much guiding people on Zoom calls. But I'm happy about like where we are.
Okay, well, it's a wonderful thing to be happy from a production perspective, but
Right.
from a market perspective, Kavita, where do you see podcasts going? Is it like a pivotal point from a market perspective? Are the early adopters and innovators going towards early majority, or is it still early days? How are people perceiving podcasts? Is there any change that you've seen?
So I think podcasts and radio, I think, are having their little moment in the sun.
Hmm.
I think audio, just like I said, the ease of, like, being able to communicate is easier. Video maybe, but I personally feel that this is a magic moment for behavior change.
Yeah.
I think, just like I said earlier about the fact that people were not really prepared for a long lockdown.
Yeah.
What is a lockdown? How are we? What is this? What does this mean? How much of this time are we really going to spend at home working? So at the same time, I feel like, we've seen a huge surge in listens. We've had some changes in how those listens are happening.
Yeah.
We would normally see a very organic 10% month on month growth on listeners. And that could, and when people ask me, when you're a cash strapped startup, like, Kavita, how do you market? And I'm like, my content strategy is my marketing strategy. How the kind of shows that you put out kind of always pull in a new pocket of listeners. And what that can do for you is that it can help you figure how you want to progress in what kind of shows you want to put out right now at this time. So what we're seeing right now is that we're seeing a huge jump in desktop listens, because a really huge part of podcast listening happens on your commute. And since commutes don't exist anymore, and maybe your outdoor time doesn't exist anymore, then what is it that is, replacing this consumption time? And I think now you spend maybe 3 hours cleaning your home and cooking, right? And so you still have a large chunk to kind of podcast listening. So I think it's interesting, because I think in the first 3 or 4 weeks, I think there was a little bit of a, I'm going to sit at home and watch every single show I have missed on an OTT platform. And then suddenly you realize that, oh my God, there's a single television and I need to share this with my sibling. And so podcasts, offer you that little like bubble of privacy, So what that does is that you've got your headphones on and you're pretty much transported to like some other place. So I guess that's what is kind of happening. But hopefully this trend continues.
Okay.
And we'll see where we get at.
All right, thanks a lot. Well, that's a great segue for me to ask my second question, and my second question is about, actually it's a question from somebody who's sent this to us. It says, "What is brilliant content?" We keep talking about, that's brilliant content, that's brilliant content. So what is brilliant content? And because OML has done so many crazy things as far as content is concerned, I wanted to get your perspective, Gunjan, on what, according to you, is brilliant content. What makes it, today you can say that even this Zoom call is brilliant content, or somebody's Instagram stories are brilliant content. What is brilliant content according to you?
So honestly, brilliant content is what works for you. And I think Kavita touched upon that earlier as well.
Yeah.
Essentially, we're catering to audiences of one now. Given how fragmented the digital media landscape is, there are subcultures and smaller pockets. Everyone's news feeds and timelines are individualistic to them. They are constructed by personal preferences and personal behavior patterns. So if you chance upon something and you watch it and you like it, it is brilliant content. And while we have a whole team that looks at data and analytics and all of that, right? All of those things only help in terms of creating the guardrails. Which, in advertising parlance, is probably the brief.
Are you driven by data first, or are you driven by your intuition first and then you check it against data?
It has to be a combination of both, because creativity is essentially human effort. Yes, you can draw inspiration from the data and what it's telling you, but after that, what you do is entire. which
Okay.
is why for us at OML, it's always about the creators we manage. It's about what ideas they have because they probably know their audiences best. So it's
Mm-hmm.
for us, it's more about making those ideas come into fruition. And honestly, they're the most creative folk we know. So they're the guys that create the brilliant content.
Right. But I'm just trying. So what you're saying is brilliant content is decided by the market, and that's a pretty interesting way. But my question, I think you answered it partially. Do you start with data, or do you start with your gut, and then you corroborate it with data? How does it work for you?
So, like I said, there isn't necessarily a starting point. Of
So, okay.
course, depending on what the necessary outcome is. So, hey, if we're creating branded content, then
Mm-hmm.
yes, we will follow
Yeah.
audience matching as a prereq. We
Yeah.
will follow trends that a particular TG is, sort of be displaying as behavior patterns. We
Yeah.
will make sure that the content that we put out is rooted in those. So
Yeah.
yes, data is very necessary there because then, hey, it's not an art project; it's a marketing project. You're not
Correct.
funding a personal art project, right? I like this artist, I'm going to work with this artist. It's more about, hey, this is what I need as marketing reach, and therefore this is what I'm going to work with.
Okay.
But of course, when we're working on shows, like I said, honestly, our starting point is the creators. They
Mm-hmm.
have ideas that haven't probably been done before, and those deserve to get made. So I don't believe those are necessarily rooted in data, but I'm sure the platforms that are commissioning it, and I'm sure Kavita can talk a bit more about this, there
Yeah.
is necessarily a content strategy that then says that, hey, if I work with this creator on this particular show, it gets me audiences that I didn't have before. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there is some sort of sense of, hey, okay, this artist has this much audience inbuilt into their fan following, so this is what we bet on.
Okay. Well, thanks. In fact, that's a great segue for Kavita to come in and tell me what she thinks. What is brilliant content, and how do you figure it? Because in your case, as well as in Gunjan's case, you are creating not just content which is dissimilar from each other, but really dissimilar, right? So you have the traveling professor's diary, but then you have your so different from somebody Agla station, whatever. So it's so different, right? How the hell do you figure that out?
So I think unlike maybe the creator network that OML has, right? I mean, these guys are really well known. They're funny. They're popular. They're very good at what they do.
Yeah.
All kinds of things. I think we needed to kind of start from scratch.
Yeah.
I think if we have 100 shows, I think maybe only two of our hosts are like outside of Cyrus, nobody else who really came from any kind of hosting experience or.
Right.
And so we needed to kind of identify. So I think a lot of it, I think where IVM was concerned was gut. I'm a marketing person turned content person. So I pretty much look at things as like, okay, there are like, I see gaps. I see content and I see gaps within them. And so there is an opportunity there. And, I think I can pretty much layer a certain idea and build it to suit a certain palette. I don't know what that palette is. I think someone out there, has, an appetite for something like that. One great thing that we've managed to do is that we've really, really managed to experiment. I think we've, had the opportunity to go out there and literally throw pebbles and see, let's see what ripple effect this creates, right? Let's see what. Another thing is that, I personally believe that every creative idea or every narrative, has a primary audience. You put out a show, a storytelling show, that story listening fans are there to lap that stuff up. How are you now going to kind of find your secondary and tertiary audiences? So again, I guess that's my brand and advertising experience or marketing experience, that I'm just like, every single idea can't be this, let's hide behind an esoteric curtain towards, because hey, we are podcasts, we can be the niche within the niche. And no, I think every show should be marketable. I think every show should tell a certain relatable story. I think every host needs to be spectacularly good at like what subject matter expertise they bring to the table. Podcast hosts are not interviewers, or that's not what they do. I think podcasts are about great conversations, right? I think your ability to have a good conversation will set you apart and build in certain amount of relatability where your fans or your supposed fans are, because we've had to kind of start from scratch. Like, I know, Sid, you're really popular in Micah and most other colleges, but we needed to kind of build you up, into a person that, hey, so I know you could be a familiarity, but like, how else is this narrative going to attract listeners? So that's why then, if you see the kind of show you put on, I'm sure you know this because you record this on a weekly basis, but you know that every time you're telling a story, you know that anyone or everyone who's out there who picks what your point is the audience.
Yeah.
So now that could be a 15-year-old or that could be a 60-year-old who's like, oh man, this penny just dropped right now.
Okay.
Which is fine, right? Which is great. But I guess that's how. So a lot of it is gut, yes. In our case, like I said, we are experimenting with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, there's some amount of strategy in how you bring out quality conversations.
Okay, very interesting. So now I've started getting a lot of. Okay, I'm just going to show you this to scare the both of you. I've started getting questions like mad. So I'm now going to ask separate questions. Okay, so question for Gunjan. Okay, the question is, and I'm going to also add my 2 bits to it. According to me, I think that because we've gone lockdown, it's not just going to be digital. It's actually going to be physical because we are connected to each other as a tribe, right? And the fact is that we miss that. And I think that we don't really recognize that we missed that. But do you see actually people, there was something called the roaring 20s, which happened immediately after, the swine flu and the depression, right? So do you see something like that happening? If yes, can you justify that? If no, can you tell me why not?
Sure. Honestly, if the roaring 20s is something that we should be expecting, we should also be expecting a lot of hideaway bars, which, by the way, did get found. So I won't be surprised. Honestly, it's a very human reaction to it. There are a lot of travel companies that have releases saying, hey, we're banking on millennials traveling to make up for the last few months in lockdown. Guys, please don't. If any of you are planning to, it's a really bad idea. Because we've studied what's happened in the past with, say, the Spanish flu or the first wave of influenza, etc. There's always been a second and a third wave, and those have been far more deadlier. So in terms of OML preparing for it, I think it will be a combination of physical and digital. In my mind, shoots will open before events do, because shoots are a lot more controllable. There's smaller groups of people. You can control who goes in, who goes out. You can keep a sense of medical history. You can track all of those things. So I believe shoots will start before events do. And even with events, I don't believe that we've done the best job of converting Weekender as a festival into an online experience just yet. We even did this.
I stopped going to Calcutta, by the way. There's somebody who's asking that question. Why did NH7 stop coming to Kolkata after 2015?
I touched about that before, about it being a marketing exercise and not just an art project.
I'm just... Sorry, I'm just... Yeah.
But honestly, the numbers didn't justify it. We never seemed to be able to pull the kind of audiences that maybe make sense in a Kolkata. And perhaps the lineup needed to be relooked at. So we hope we can come back. And we'll come back with a lineup that makes sense.
Both of you are from a marketing background, but now, also looking at content in a much deeper way. And so therefore, it's strange, but because your background is like that, it's coming through in the kind of decision making. Because Kavita was talking of need gap and all of that, and you're talking of, okay, this market's not working for us and stuff like that. It's quite refreshing because I've had enough of creators who go off on their own limb without really figuring out how it's going to work. I have a question for Kavita. Now, we've talked of changing content consumption behavior. Right? You've said that how content changes and stuff like that. Now, do you see any scope for, I'm just trying to figure out, how podcasts can actually embrace, let's say, small businesses or medium to small businesses. Do you think that can they market themselves through podcasts in a different way? I know it's connected to monetization, but... Yeah,
sorry, I cut you.
No, go on. It's all right. This is a webinar where we can cut each other.
No, so I think small businesses will need a a new look at how they kind of do things. I don't know if they'll have the money to really experiment with like a new medium per se, and how they could probably use a platform like this to kind of, put forward like what their brand story is.
Yeah.
But so I don't know that, whether they will benefit. Like the good thing about like podcasts or any kind of like online content is that it's there for perpetuity, right? Like you'll be able to like, bank on the fact that, you could make for yourself like a great 10-part series on what like the ethos or what like the product of your organization is. But at the end of it all, I guess small and medium enterprises will need far more, more impactful ideas for like, with better reach, if I may say so. So, and for right now, like I said, like podcast is a subculture business. We are not like a top priority, like where like first, I mean, we need to break so many of those mindsets. I mean, right now, like I said, I would describe the podcast audience as the tastemaker audience. These are people that, these are listeners, of course, but even the people that, are creating this kind of content, and for brands to be aware of this. So I think that will be a little while before they kind of use a medium like this, because it will be too much of an experiment, I think.
Okay. So you're literally saying no to them. So don't do it.
I'm happy to. No, not that. I'm just saying that, I mean, said we waited for 4 years to kind of to get like even like the hottest brands to look at us, right? Like, and I'm so from that perspective, I'm like, I know how tough that is. To get, someone who probably needs to use, newspapers or radio or something like that to create far more impact. I think they'll probably go there. But if they're coming to me, I'll be happy.
Yeah, but here's a really interesting story, right? I have heard of some guy just shooting stray dogs, not shooting, but shooting stray dogs on his camera, and saying, okay, this guy's here, this guy's here, this guy's here, and suddenly Gaichap Tobacco company started sponsoring his Instagram stories because it got really big. Okay, so this is like really crazy, and the reason why I'm using this crazy example is that perhaps maybe because all of us come from a background which is old media in that sense, we could be also relooking at things from, I don't know what you guys think.
Gaichap Media has or maybe the owner of this company has a really young son or daughter that is rethinking like a lot of content strategy for them. And, they're obviously being able to see the joys of probably, spending money on TikTok or on Instagram. But that'll be refreshing. I'll be happy to kind of troubleshoot, that opportunity if that comes my way. But I mean, like I said, it's not that, they can't. We've worked with some really interesting upcoming brands, not established, because I also think that the synergy is in like just as much as we're like pretty much like flying out like into like the oblivion of like the kind of work we're doing right now. And I guess even brands need to kind of think that way, right? So I think before the Unilever's
go on.
Sorry, I missed that.
No, I'm saying, how do you see the evolution of monetization in your respective industry? So it's a question for both of you. It's asked by Tushar. By the way, shout out to Pranjal and Vyom and all the rest of you who are asking questions. Right.
Okay. Great. So I think we're already on the way to monetize. I think we needed to kind of hit like a critical like I said, all of 2019, I went nuts, like, producing shows. I was very keen on getting, at least if nothing, to be spoken about in the market as a 100 podcast network, and that we don't just mean, we've got like 5 items on the menu and I'm like comfortable with just that. It was important for us to kind of, you spend all this time cultivating, interest from other people that with what you're doing, right? And so we needed to kind of have a very sizable opportunity to kind of say, hey, come home. We've got like, 100 like goodies for you to try from. And so we needed to kind of get there to at least even being spoken in like, advertising circles, in marketing circles, to kind of, so I think, we needed to focus. But now that we're there, and because these 100 odd shows get us, the kind of listenership that we now have,
Yeah.
I guess brands now are realizing that, it's best also to be a part of a slightly clutter-free advertising environment, because there is a certain amount of hygiene that podcast formats follow, maybe over radio. That was something that people spoke about radio. So I guess the clutter-free environment will kind of lure people in, but I guess it needs a certain kind of a thinking optic to kind of understand that opportunity there. So, and it'll take some time maybe, but we're there actually. Like I said, we've already worked. I think banking and financial brands are really, up to kind of experimenting. So we work with a lot of that. And more marketing heads love us, and they listen to a lot of our shows. We are now cleanly finding ourselves in like media plans, which
It's
I'm
a
happy
small
about.
part, I think. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Gunjan, how do you see the evolution of monetization in your industry? Also, what are your views on virtual concerts? Vyom is asking that question, so you can answer either one.
I'll take the first one actually, and I think Kavita also touched a bit on that. So all media has two forms of monetization, right? It's either subscription or sponsorship.
Correct.
Sponsorship is advertising, subscription is fan money or ticket money for us. With in the current landscape, ticket money is something that we've experimented with. We actually took Circuit, which was our comedy festival that we announced in March. We cancelled it and flipped to a completely digital event in April. And we actually managed to sell out shows, which was a complete surprise. We had audiences paying more ticket money than they were in the original on-ground avatar. And we have audiences dialing from across the country. So I think going back to what Kavita said, it's the content that will draw the audiences.
Yeah.
And that's really why they were there. In terms of subscription, there are brands that have realized the value of being associated with creators. And that's really what we've built our entire global creator network on the back of. So this entire global brand solutions business is literally that. It is brands parking their digital media budgets with us and saying, hey, you guys know how content marketing works. You tell us which creators to work with. So we're actually working with the biggest creators in Russia and Thailand and South Africa, creating content in local languages. And all these videos are number one videos in their markets. And this is all, like you asked earlier, this is data driven. These are recommendations that come from the back of analyzing their YouTube channels, knowing what will work. Although we don't understand the language, we're able to work with brands in those markets. And these are fairly large FMCG brands as well as new age brands. So that's really refreshing. So Kavita, I think there are some brands who are going to start now recognizing that it is more essential to reach smaller but more authentic communities as opposed to the spray and pray of mass media. So the way mass media worked in the past was obviously where you had FMCG brands saying, hey, I'm going to buy 50% of airtime because I need to show muscle. So as P&G or HUL, I need my distributors to see that going to buy as much rack space as well. So the shelf space was almost equivalent to the amount of money they spent on media, and that's exactly how media producers were incentivized as well. But that's completely changed, especially because audience behavior has changed. None of us watch TV anymore, so that form of reaching audiences is pretty much dead. If you want to reach people like us, you've got to find us on either listening to a podcast or following one of our favorite creators. And by that definition, creators then become your media vehicles. They become your brand ambassadors because they're talking on behalf of you, and your creative directors because they're the ones you don't necessarily need the agencies of the past. And that's really what we've seen with, in terms of monetization, that's a big part of creators seeing money coming in the future.
Okay, Gunjan, there was a second question before we get too lost in the weeds on this one about virtual concerts, and let me combine it. Another question which is asked by Sankal, because it's kind of related. What he says is that the growth driver for the entertainment industry so far has been the experience-driven economy. Okay. Now, what would be the growth driver in the near future?
So it's still going to be experience. It's going to be the online experience now, which is why we need to find a way to make our digital experiences better.
Okay.
So it is no longer the fact that we can use a Skype call or a Zoom call to talk to each other and host a webinar, and that suffices for this sort of a program. That's not going to suffice, say, for a comedy show anymore, or a quiz show. You will most definitely need a separate video that's dialed in, that's showing a leaderboard, that tells you how much time is left, that makes the entire visual experience more exciting, that finds a way to bring the audiences in. So going forward, yes, I completely accept that we haven't found a way to replace the intimacy of watching a live show online, but that's something that's on us and we're figuring that out.
Okay. Kavita, question for Kavita now. But Kavita, what do you think about radio?
Big fan, yeah. I personally think that, so my love for audio comes from, having spent 4 years working at a radio station. Pretty much, similar in the sense this was way back in 2003 when, at that point in time when I started working at this radio station and I called all my friends in the media to tell them that I'm going to be working at a radio station. They're like, Kavita, when there is television and there is all this big stuff to do, why would you work at a radio station? And, actually it's really odd, but I think I have spent my funnest years building the workings of a radio station. And I thought it was amazing to have two people sitting in a studio talking to themselves. And there's a pretty much 7-second difference before the entire city and its vicinity can hear you. I thought that was damn cool. But I think radio is here, right? I think the good thing about radio is that it's hassle-free. You can pretty much turn on a frequency and you don't need to download an app. You don't need to be a follower of a certain kind of creator. You don't need to do any of that. You need to basically, it's a little easier to kind of manage. And one of the reasons why it's from a penetration perspective, right? Most brands will look at radios because of radio station activities because of how localized that content and that approach is. I think even today, I think 7 weeks into lockdown, it's interesting to see how radio is trumping general news credibility over news channels. Because they're reporting from where you are at, and that's one of the things that makes it so cool and so relevant. So I don't see, a lot of times people are like, okay, so podcast is radio, and I'm like, no, I think we kind of do very different things. Yes, I would always say that podcasts are maybe radio 10.0, but that's also because of what, like I said earlier, government regulations makes it damn difficult for them to have some fun. And so they're a little limited to kind of work a certain parameter.
Okay. So, you're such a positive person. You're also positive for your so-called competition. I'm just trying to understand. Okay. So, what do you consider as competition for podcasts? What is the biggest competition? Is it is the mindset thing the biggest competition?
I think music is. I think, if you're listening to a podcast and you spend long hours listening to a playlist, maybe you're an artist, maybe. So I think our closest competitor could be music. Also, one of the reasons why OTT platforms are so interested in creating long form talk content, because, they want to be able to kind of hold or retain people who, are listening to music on an OTT platform for longer, right? Because podcast listening creates stickiness, and you're going to be spending maybe 40 minutes listening to a show vis-a-vis probably a 20-minute playlist that you may or then, and of course at the same time music is also pretty much the same product across so many mediums. If you like a certain song, very likely that you'll find it on Spotify and Gaana and Wink and Savan. Talk content is going to differentiate you. And so I personally feel that I think the closest competitor could be music, just about the time that you spent engaging in that activity. I think radio is not, because I think we do completely different things. Our content is, people ask us, when is IVM going to be doing Bollywood stuff? And I'm just look at how over catered to that market is. You want to know any more Ranveer Singh stories? I don't think, and when I probably produce 250 shows, I'll probably do Bollywood. Yes, those are the fastest selling products, but we've kind of made it a little difficult for us to not go and do the most obvious.
Okay, hold on to that. I'm going to come back with a question on you, but I want to ask Gunjan this first. You spoke about, how you got disenchanted with advertising, and maybe you went to branding and the rest of it. What do you think is, what do you think consider as competition for OML? Because you guys are in a lot of different stuff. Okay. And secondly, what do you think is the best way of marketing in today's, sort of new age digital information symmetrical world?
Not accounting for my professional bias at all, I would say the best form of marketing is to go with creators. Whether that's on a podcast platform like IVM or across social media platforms, because you're literally getting the unfiltered attention of an audience that's subscribed, that wants to hear from you. Yeah. And that's what really allows you to get that message across in a very organic way. But again, I know that can account for professional bias, but there's luckily enough data to back that up. And that's honestly one of my favorite parts of the work that we do. We actually have a media and analytics team that literally tracks every piece of content that's generated by the company. And we're constantly listening for trends. We're constantly listening for similarities. We're trying to figure out what it means to launch newer artists on the back of content that we've already created. So content becomes the marketing as well. So that's probably my answer to the second question. In terms of the first question, honestly, I think we're probably in the best place that we could be. So given that OML is a multitude of so many different streams, it also makes us larger than the sum of its parts, right? And each one of the businesses feed into the other one. So while we started out as artist management, we built capabilities along the way to support the artists that we rep. So when we used to manage musicians, we started a live business division because we needed to find stages to enough stages. So we said, hey, let's build our own music festival. Then we started repping comedians, and we were like, hey, we need to quickly figure out how to get them more YouTube videos. When we did that, we realized that, hey, YouTube videos, the little AdSense money that comes in is not going to help. We need to go and speak to brands, and that's when the brand solutions team really got built out. I remember the first deal we cracked, we went to a brand and said that, hey, today you spend 2 rupees on YouTube as CPC, give us 2 rupees per view for the video that we put out with you. And of course, we knocked it out of the park. So we obviously figuring out newer forms of monetization, and that's the brand solutions team. So while vertical wise, if you compare us, yes, there are other management companies, there are other content production houses, there are other media agencies, but there isn't really one that I've come across as yet that does all of these things together. And that's why I would say that we're fairly new age in the way that all these pieces come together.
Wonderful. Thank you for mentioning YouTube, because my question to Kavita was that if you see YouTube, okay, and if you see TikTok, okay, YouTube versus TikTok currently is trending. Right, so basically 30 seconds versus 10 minutes, right? Now, I want to ask you that, A, what do you think, okay, who's winning in YouTube versus TikTok? And B, how do you correlate it with, your business?
So we distribute to YouTube. I mean, it's one place where I think, I was watching one of your previous conversations. I think the first one, with Kunal Jeswani, and we all spoke about the fact that how YouTube now is a platform for all kinds of consumption, right? It's not only video, or you're pretty much listening to music, and from a platform point when there are so many other pure music or music first platforms. TikTok today, I think, is crazy, right? Like every time I look at that platform and I'm just like, wow, it's amazing what they've managed to do in such quick time. For every video conversation I've had, people are just talking about ADHD and how like the size of the video is just like dropping. You went from 5 minutes of engagement on one platform to like, hey man, you have all of 15 seconds. Show me what you can do. Compared to what podcasts are. People keep asking me, what's the perfect duration to a podcast? What is that? And there is no single answer to it. We've got everything from 5 minutes to 2 hours. It really depends on your interest levels, in the subject or in the host, and what that information dissemination that's happening, So if I want to tell you how you can probably get better with your habits, you need 5 minutes to tell you that, if you are waking up at 4 to 7 and if you're still rushed, just wake up at 6:30. Like, it's just a better habit for you to have. But at the same time, when you're talking policy stuff, you want longer conversations around it. We also think that, first, anyone has a great 10-minute conversation. I think anybody manages. If I have to tell you, say, tell me about yourself in 10 minutes, everyone will do it like without a problem. The real conversation starts after that.
Yes.
So I will use, TikTok and YouTube to kind of market, because our content around content video. We're trying to put a face to every host you tune in, to every week. You should know like who this person is and follow them from a personality perspective rather than just a show perspective. So they fall really, hugely in, like I said, in our marketing component. Be able to put out the personalities that we are putting out on the podcast platform.
Yeah. Okay. Well, now that you've mentioned that, the real conversation happens way deep into the conversation and all, here are some googlies from me to you. Okay. The first googly is, okay, Gunjan, if you had to advise Kavita on her business, and if Kavita, you had to advise Gunjan on her business as, just an observer on the way in which you're looking at it, what's the one thing that you would tell each other saying, hey, you know what, try this stuff?
Interesting.
Yeah, I know.
I really love Gunjan's business. I know it may be really tough, but I'm usually thinking, what more? They do almost everything that I think every new business should do.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to flip this around and say there's one thing that I hope we did, that obviously Kavita does amazingly well, is that she's figured out how to reach audiences directly, which I think is really... really credible, and especially at this, given the way the media landscape is so fragmented, being able to own the pipelines that reach your audiences directly, then allow you to push more content through it, and that.
Sir, but
no, I think I don't think it's very much. I think again, it's too soon to tell. I'm sure like all the minds that are working, in an office way ahead of what, like I said, creating a virtual experience, and how do you define an experience? I think the first time I heard of experiential marketing was when I worked with the IPL, and then very quickly, it was the music festival business. And now that the music festival business kind of spoke about how you need to kind of come together to listen to music and experience this together. And I guess one big challenge they have is to redefine what an experience means, and how that is going to, how a live experience when you're meeting people and, holding hands and hugging people to kind of, enjoying pretty much the same thing to doing this from your homes. I think it will happen, because more than a challenge from OML's perspective, I think this is our challenge, right? We now need to kind of get a little okay with some things changing for the better part of maybe the next 2 years. We don't know how long this is going to take. So I guess we learn along the way. But I'm like I said, I think to put out great time, I think for you all to put out new musicians, or even newer comedy talent, because it's been 50 days in lockdown, and I kind of tune into a concert every evening. And I have learned so much about so many new musicians. And I think, even because that's what OML is known for. I think OML is known to kind of give you an idea of what the real talent pool is. And I think they'll again need to kind of go back to that to kind of bring that new essence.
Okay.
Maybe
good.
that would be something.
I count that. That's a good answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Now for Gunjan. Gunjan, you cannot tell me what you liked about IVM. You have to tell them what they can do differently.
Yeah, tell me, Gunjan, please.
So honestly, I think the fact that there is this extensive roster of hosts that you're already working with, and there is a sort of content that you're creating around the shows that you're already. I'm wondering if there's a way to almost write that to monetize. So if you have you have the pipelines, you have access to consumer data, you have so much that's already been sort of sowed in terms of building the base or the foundation. It's about overlaying that with D2C brands if possible. Maybe it's a shot in the dark, but that's something that
actually right now I think that it is the perfect time to kind of do this, right? I think it is really actually about, it was actually our big 2020 plan, like, kind of figure this, going into like finding like how we should be able to monetize this stuff. And yeah, you're right, actually, to kind of being able to articulate or put this, a story in a great presentation to, to have people look at it and view it as much which we do. But you're right, actually, we should be able to kind of, figure that these experiential businesses, like I said, trying to get, brands to not ask us for numbers over, it's qualitative over quantitative stuff, and we're hoping that we can, kind of change that conversation for it to work our way. Okay. But yeah, thank you. I will do this.
I have to say, this is a really unfair question because she knows her business better than I ever would.
I know.
And, but yes, sir, I'd love to hear from you. What you think we should do, considering you obviously have experience from across the globe and you're seeing this.
I'll need to invite you for another podcast or for another.
That fits in. Sure.
I'm going to give you a minute advice.
Control. I'm not going to. Just saying. No, but to be honest, I think that you guys are doing such amazing things that I can only wish more power to you. Because see, the fact is that if you look at your insight, your core insight, Gunjan, that you're going with the creator. That is directly connecting with the way in which the world is shaping. So the world is shaping from a place wherein you're not going for market or producer driven thing. It is actually audience driven. So I think you're on to the on the right thing. I would probably consolidate and probably take a little more risk. Probably. Okay. Probably. For Gunjan, not for Kavita. Kavita, I think.
I'm living on the edge.
Yeah, no, I think Kavita's she's garnered the whole portfolio of clients, which is a podcast, which is amazing to see. What I feel will really help a podcast business in today's. I wonder if you've seen Luminary, Kavita. Luminary is now that is not going to work in India, but we need to find a different business model, perhaps, which is not just pure subscription or pure advertising. I don't know what that is. And
this is where we want to be, right? Premium is where we want to be. I mean, we'd be happy. One of the reasons why we have an ace distribution game is because I can't wait for you to come to us and find us. Discoverability with podcasts is tough. You don't know where to look for them. One of the reasons why we ensured we were on every single platform that you were listening to something on was because of that. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, we want to be able to kind of, like I said, we'll have to sit somewhere in this sweet spot. There is, of course, the advertiser money. But I guess a lot of times when we have fans writing in, most of them are under like something like, man, I can't believe that this show comes to me for free on a weekly basis. I can't believe that, these gems or these pieces of wisdom come to us for free. And in India, we aren't habituated to pay for content, right? Yeah. I feel bad for my friends in print journalism who get like really, but at the same time, I think we're trying to analyze this market to kind of see where, the growth in the freemium piece is going to be. It'll be happy to kind of have people. So it's a 10 or 20 part series. You'll get the first 3 for free and the rest you'll probably need to pay in. You'll probably like kind of weave in these kind of models and make very specific content compared like from all the businesses, So even if you're a very niche business, like your earlier question on a small and medium enterprise, there are maybe 5 or 10,000 people out there who might be really, really interested in that content, but those will be MVP lessons. Right. And, we'll be happy to create that content because it will sit well in that category.
Okay. Wow, you realize that we're 2 minutes away from we've gapped so much.
We managed to.
We managed that. No. You guys have been wonderful. I just have one final question for you, right? Your quick take on what Zoom means there, both of you. Because I read an article by Kunal Jaswani on I think brand equity or somewhere, wherein he said, like, look, this is shit. We want the regular office stuff to come back, and it was a complete contrarian sort of view than what people are saying. Zoom, yeah, and they're doing, and they're so efficient and effective and stuff like that. So there are two sides to this, and I'm sure Kunal must be getting a lot of hiccups as I say this. But I just wanted your take on how work from home and everything. What do you guys think about it?
Gunjan?
Yeah, so honestly, I'm exhausted. Just the number of calls. And see, I believe that workplaces were designed for efficiency. Being in the same room with people gets things done a lot faster than scheduling phone calls. In fact, the first few weeks, we sort of fell into this trap where most of us are spending most of the time on the phone and not really getting to the actual work. Because even to replace walking up to somebody's desk and saying, hey, got a minute, and covering whatever you needed to now takes a call to schedule a call to then get on the call and then get the call done, and obviously with niceties, etc., added in, it's about half an hour. And that obviously made the entire process really inefficient. But that said, since the beginning of Jan, actually, we've been working from home every Wednesday. We announced work from home Wednesdays in Jan because we said, hey, if there's one day of the week, we can put 150 cars less on the roads of Bombay. If we can give our teams 2 hours to just recoup and get over whatever the rest of the week has been like, because obviously travel times in Mumbai are crazy, we would have done something for our teams and for the city. So all of that training has been extremely helpful at this point of time. So we're far more disciplined. But that said, we're going to have to learn how to work around it. I don't think we have an option. Even if it means coming back to work right now, in fact, like some of the protocol that I was saying you were developing around shoots, we're doing that for coming back to the office as well. And we're actually dividing teams by, hey, who lives at home with parents above 60 or kids under 10, they're not going to come to office. Who lives in areas that have been really badly affected, not going to come to office. That brings us down to about 30% of the workforce. And we're obviously going to have to wait and see if there's a second wave and a third wave and all of that. So we're honestly monitoring the situation as it goes. I don't believe the way we use Zoom right now is sustainable. So it's going to be a bit of both. It's going to be a bit about us learning these tools better and being a lot more disciplined, as well as figuring out what it means to really just schedule our days better. So I think honestly for our work from home Wednesdays, we might just turn it into no calls Wednesdays for now, just because you have to give people a break from Zoom. Zoom is particularly probably half the reason for me feeling fatigued most days. So yeah, I'm not a fan. That's it.
Okay. No. Which side of the fence you're on? What about you, Kavita? Anything to add?
So no, I think I'll second what Gunjan said because it's Zoom is exhausting. I'm glad that we're a really, really lean team as well, right? So it doesn't require that much coming together, all the time, every time. Most of maybe production or engineering or editing or whatever is kind of working smoothly because, like I said, leaner team, so leaner, in terms of the fact that we don't spend so much time figuring out next steps. I guess that happens between my partner and me. Amit and me, and we're pretty much, spending time doing that. But it's been exhausting. At the same time, I'm enjoying this time at home. I when you're, like I said, in the very initial stages of your business, I feel like I wear so many hats. I'm so tired of switching them over all the time that I think I needed this time to be like, Kavita, you can sit down and wear as many hats. So at least you're seated and not running around. So I guess, also it's hey, well, the sun shines. What other option do you have? You'll need to kind of be as effective and still, go and do what you have to. So yeah, I guess let's wait and watch.
Wait and watch. Well, that seems to be the mantra. Thank you, ladies. This has been a pleasure, absolute pleasure. I think you've made me and this entire thing look good with the quality of your answers. Thank you for holding no punches back. And also, forgive me if I have said anything wrong or anything stupid in the course of this conversation. The fault is all mine. But I would really appreciate it if, you just continue doing whatever you're doing. It's an amazing thing. You belong to the new world, and all the best. Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you, to be here.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having us.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. Bye.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Gunjan.
Thanks. Yeah.